Hello and welcome back to the Rational Theology Podcast. Today we've got a very special guest, and I'm honored to welcome. I'm honored to welcome Dr. Marcus H. Martins, a distinguished scholar and educator originally from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He earned a bachelor's in business management, a master's in organizational behavior, and a PhD in sociology, religion, race, and ethnic relations, all from Brigham Young University. Before shifting to academia, he served as a systems analyst and project manager for the Brazilian government and worked as a consultant. And in his academic career, he's taught at BYU Provo, Ricks College, and chaired the Department of Religious Education at BYU, and was also Dean of Religious Education there. He's also authored Setting the Record Straight, Blacks in the Mormon Priesthood, led the Brazil Sao Paulo North Mission as mission president, served as temple officiator, he was multi-time bishop and stake leader. He translated the Book of Mormon into Portuguese, and he hosts a weekly Come Follow Me study live stream on Portuguese Scripture Central. So welcome, Brother Martins. How are you doing today?
Not going to catch your breath?
That's what I'm doing now.
Did you already write that yourself, or is that ChatGPT?
That was AI. That was AI.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, no, you didn't tell them, our special connection here.
Right, yeah. So
were you hiding information from your distinguished audience here?
No, yeah. So Brother Martins actually taught my parents about 20 years ago at BYU Hawaii. And so he also just taught me in my first religion course here at BYU. So
And you still have a testimony?
I so far.
We're good.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty much family friend. So glad to sit down, have this conversation with you. And yeah, I mean, you've been in the academic space longer than I've been alive. So hopefully we can all learn a little bit from you today and have a good conversation. But yeah,
That's a good hope.
that's
That's a good hope.
yeah, we'll see if it comes to pass or not. But yeah, I guess kind of just wanted to go through a little bit of your life story today, and maybe talk about some interesting stories from your life. And yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of interesting things you've been a part of, and a lot of interesting things you've done. So I guess maybe start us off with where were you born?
Well, it was the Evangelical Hospital in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. That's too much detail, right?
No, however much detail you want to go into.
Oh, okay. Well, in those days, this was 66 years ago, there were no disposable diapers, so I believe I may have given my mother, a lot of grief. That's too much detail, right?
Well, maybe that was
all right, okay, that's too much detail.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, born and raised, and we had I was an only child for my first 7 years, and then I had a sister, and later another brother and sister joined our family. So I come from a family of 4, and today, after all these years, my wife and I, we have 4 children and 8 grandchildren.
Nice.
And ranging from age 7 to 19. In fact, our oldest granddaughter, this is June of 2025. So next month, July 2025, she's heading to the NTC to serve a full-time mission in the Porto mission.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, we're really, really happy for
That's
that.
exciting.
So yeah,
That's
so that's the
sure.
Cliff Notes of the summarized version
Right. Yeah.
story,
And maybe
You can tell about my speeding tickets or
yeah, let's not get into
that's
to past sins or legal run-ins with the law.
legal. Okay, look, I have my passport. I'm a U.S. citizen. I have my passport here. I don't know if you work for ICE. No. Okay, good. So I don't want to wake up in El Salvador tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully you won't get deported after this interview, but we'll see how far you make it.
My fingers here.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe. So what was like your religious upbringing like? What's the religious setting in Rio de Janeiro?
Well, at that point.
And also, what year were you born? If that's
Look,
not off
I
limits.
just told would you please pay attention? You paid attention in class this whole semester here. And now I just told you I'm 66 years old. Do the math.
Okay.
That's not. Oh, wait. Let me do. 1959.
Okay, there we go.
At that point, Brazil was still today, but predominantly Catholic.
Mhm.
However, my parents and I, we were kind of semi-active Catholics.
Okay.
I went to catechism and, we would go to mass occasionally, but we're really active in one of the several African spiritualist religions, which was very popular in Brazil. It's what they call collectively, people know as Macumba. We were in one of those, uh, sort of a branches of Macumba, what's called Umbanda. That's where we were really active.
Mhm.
But, we used to tell people.
What does Macumba look like?
Well, it's a collection of traditions, religious traditions brought by African slaves to Brazil that involved chanting, dancing, and spiritual possession, spirits that come and possess people's bodies, and so we were really active on that.
Okay.
But we told everybody else when they asked, well, certainly, we're Roman Catholics.
Yeah.
Roman Catholics. That's what I learned as a boy, is I just say that you're Roman Catholic. But my father's name is Helvasio Martins. My mother was Ruda Martins. They're both deceased now. And my father had this background. He was a well-educated man who rose through the ranks of the Brazilian National Oil Company, and a man who read widely, not only his field, which was accounting and finance, but also philosophy, which is your interest there, and religion. And he had this idea that if there is only one God, there should be only one religion.
Yeah.
But which religion would be that one religion?
Right.
And so he was convinced that the African spiritualist religions we belong to could not be really God's religion. That's one thing that he was sure.
Okay.
But he still had questions about, okay, what about Catholicism? What about the Protestant denominations? And I remember, growing up, going occasionally when my father was invited to attend some other church, we would visit. I remember visiting a Baptist church, Presbyterians, and but he never really found. And so when the missionaries of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints came, he was already curious about the church. He had been curious about the church for a while, but he was told by somebody who was not a member, and that, well, this is an American church, and you can only, my father said, he saw in those days, only church building in Rio de Janeiro. He was stuck in a traffic jam and heading home, passed in front of this beautiful, and he was impressed. The architectural style, all rectangular, modern architecture, and this strange name, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So when you're used to Catholic Church, Methodist Church, Baptist Church, and at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day. So he mentioned that next day. I said, I always found this very curious. And one of his advisors, who ironically was named Solomon, I knew the man, he said, oh, gee, boss, that's the Mormon church, I said, oh, I would like to visit someday. Really interesting building and name. And he said, well, they're an American church. You're a black. You know how they feel about blacks. Americans feel about blacks. Besides, you can only go to their church if you're invited by one of the members. So my father said, okay, fine, whatever. So when the missionaries came to our home this would have been like April, early May of 1972, my father was very, very curious about it. And so that's why they invited the missionaries to come in. And That started a 4-hour
Hours.
conversation.
Wow.
4-hour conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the missionaries arrived in my home around 9 p.m. and they left over 1 a.m.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, don't fault them, because
Yeah.
my father asked all the questions he had,
Yeah.
beginning with, okay, you guys are Americans, okay, your church is American, so what do you say about people like me? What do you say about Negroes, black people? And fortunately, the senior companion, the missionaries were elders Thomas McIntyre and Stephen Richards. Elder McIntyre was from California, Elder Richards was from Georgia, and Richard had been in Brazil for only a couple of weeks. But Elder McIntyre, the senior companion, his Portuguese was very good. And fortunately, he did not dodge the bullet, and he addressed the question right off the bat with my father. And so that led to a very extensive conversation. I was home at the time.
Yeah.
I did not participate in the conversation. I was 13 years old at the time. Okay. And I remember that I was typing a geography paper in my bedroom.
Yeah.
At a typewriter. I was typing.
With a typewriter, okay.
Yeah. And so at one point I went to the living room to see, and so I saw those two Americans wearing suits, I said, is this guy selling something? What? And so I sat down and heard some of the weirdest things, saying something about prophets and priesthoods and tribes of Israel. And, I had gone to catechism and read a little bit. I loved to read encyclopedias. Yeah, I was a nerd. I grew up as a nerd. Kids would be out in the street on summer vacation, flying kites, playing marbles, and I would be in my grandfather's house reading encyclopedias.
Yeah.
Okay? And I never heard that, so priesthood, tribes in Israel. So I knew Israel. But I said, but for us, Brazil, growing up, it's all tribes, and we thought our indigenous tribes, okay, we call them Indian tribes. And so I heard missionaries mention that, and I said, they have Indians in Israel? And then they're saying something about having a prophet or a blessing. And I thought, prophet? What do you mean, 13 years old? Okay, prophet. Some guy with the long hair or the long beard who lives in some cave and goes into trances and guesses the future.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is too weird. I gotta go back and finish my geography paper. And I went back, and that was it.
Okay.
That's all I heard that first evening. But we went to church. It was Mother's Day, I remember. And we went to a sacrament meeting, which in those days was in the afternoon, Sunday school, Sunday morning, sacrament meeting, Sunday afternoon. And it was a remarkable experience for me. I never forgot. And because it was not that building that my father had seen. It was in our neighborhood, in our part of the city. And it was still, the church had this big lot. Half of it was vacant, and the other half, there was this old house, very old. And they were waiting for the permit to tear that down and build. Today, there is a beautiful stake center there. And I remember, this old house, and that's it. This is their church. And on the backyard, there was some makeshift classrooms.
Yes.
Yeah. And I said, okay, that's the true church. The inside that they remodeled, so there was this big, hall inside for the sacrament meeting, and the floorboards creaked when they were passing the sacrament. And so you had, it was uncomfortable, but the most remarkable thing happened. As I said, I haven't forgotten that, even though 53 years have passed now. I felt very distinctively at age 13 that I belonged in that place. That was kind of home for me. I had that distinct feeling. And I mentioned that to my parents as we were driving back home. I mentioned that. I said, look, it's strange, I felt that I was at home there, felt that, this is my place. So that started our journey towards conversion, and then we were baptized on July 2nd, 1972. I mentioned the date in particular because it was the day President Joseph Fielding Smith passed away.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I don't know if you heard of our baptism, but okay, cut. Okay, okay, strike that on the record. Okay, just okay. But anyway. So that began. But, we were very well fellowshipped it was still a branch at the time. We did not have a stake in Rio de Janeiro yet. In fact, the stake would be organized 2 months later, in September of 1972. Elder Bruce R. McConkie at the Corner of the 12 Apostles went to Rio de Janeiro to organize the first stake. But immediately, as soon as we were baptized, 2 weeks after our baptism, the branch president called my father to a calling. It's interesting that besides being, a top executive in the National Oil Company, he was the controller of subsidiary of the National Oil Company, but also he was a assistant professor of finance and accounting at Rio de Janeiro State University. Mm-hmm. So he would teach a couple of nights a week. He would teach accounting or finance, depending on the semester. And so the branch president came to him and said, Brother Martinez, I understand you're also a professor. I said, yeah, I'm a professor. Okay, we need a Sunday school teacher. Okay.
Yeah.
And this was to be a Sunday school teacher 2 weeks since the baptism.
Oh, my goodness.
Of the gospel doctrine class.
Oh, yeah.
Which in those days, 1972, was for members with more than 1 year of membership.
Yeah.
So here's my father, 2 weeks in the church, teaching people who had been in the church for a year or more.
Yeah.
And there were no teacher manuals. And that year, they were studying Elder James Talmage's book, Articles of Faith. Mm. The branch president gave my father a copy of the book and said, well, next week will be chapter whatever, and that was it. So that's how our journey in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints began, mm-hmm. In that branch in Rio de Janeiro. Yeah. And from that point on, we went on. When the stake was organized 2 months later, both my parents were called to serve in stake positions. Okay. My father was called to serve as a counselor in the stake Sunday school presidency. Mm-hmm. And my mother was called to be a counselor in the stake junior Sunday school. Primary had met during the week. On Sunday, we had junior Sunday school Sunday morning. And so he was a counselor in the stake junior Sunday school. Yeah. So we were involved, right away. And I credit that part of our the process of consolidating our testimony and retention in the church was the fact that they put us to work right away. They didn't wait for, let's see if they're really going to stay in the church or not. No, they just... Right. So that's the genesis, if you will, of Martin's family in the church.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's very cool. I guess a question I have, and probably a lot of people have, is, especially more modern people, right, is how could you have joined this racist church, right? And so, or at least like a lot of critics would probably ask that, right? And so for you guys, just was, I guess the spiritual witness just so strong that it kind of, allowed you to overlook that, or how did you guys kind of grapple with
well, you see, the deal is this, okay? We grew up in Brazil. Now, Brazil has this fallacious belief, because it is a fallacy, of being a racial democracy. But those who really know Brazil know that it's not quite like that. And so we faced, racial discrimination. I remember instances during my childhood, very, sad occurrences in school and whatnot, from not only from fellow students, from classmates, but even from teachers. So it was a fact of life. And the way that my parents brought me up was one of integrity. You are not, they never articulated exactly this way, but the way I was uh, raised was one of, you have value, and nobody, no matter what they say about you, can take that intrinsic value that you have. Now, they never said in so many words. Now, here I am now, a sociologist, okay, 60 years after the fact, saying, okay, essentially, this is what my parents, essentially taught me fundamentally, philosophically. That's what they taught me. But it was. And so when we started to study the church with the help of the missionaries, we read everything they gave me, myself included. I remember reading, they gave us, assignments to read in Third Nephi, the visit of the Savior among in the ancient Americas. I also, on my own, started reading, read that, and then I went back, because I love to read. I grew up surrounded by books. As I mentioned, my father was well-read. We had a decent library, not very big, but a decent library at home, several dozen books there, including a Bible that we rarely picked up. But at that point on, we started really to open that Bible. So on my own, I started reading, after Third Nephi, I started reading First Nephi. And I read the testimony, the pamphlets, testimony of the Prophet Joseph Smith, Plan of Salvation, the commandments, and so on. We read everything. We prayed about everything. And so, yes, we obtained testimony of the truthfulness of what the missionaries were teaching us. Parallel to that, the way we were received and fellowshipped in the church, in our branch, made all the difference as well. Because even the youth, in our case, everything worked just as it was supposed to be. Even the youth, reached out to me. When my father would park the car across the street, in front of the house there, and we would enter, there was a, little, front yard there. People would come already in our direction to greet us.
Yeah.
And youth would come, okay? Young men, young women also would come and reach out to me, say, hey, how are you today? Welcome. Glad to see you in church today. So we were invited to go to service projects. She was investigators. I mentioned there was a vacant lot. One day they had to clean up, take the weeds out and so on. There was some tree trunks there. And so one Saturday morning, we went with all the other members there, helping out and so on.
Yeah.
We had activities there. They invited us to go to activities. One of the young women, in fact, at that time, she was now a young single adult, but she was a BYU student, and her family was from our branch, and she was taking a break. She was taking a break from BYU and was there visiting family. She was the one who invited me to go to, I didn't understand what she said. She said, what I understood was Musical Improvement Association. Okay, I'm here on Tuesday, and I remember in the car, we had it back home, and said, I'm not a musician. I don't play instruments. I do a little piano, but my parents said, oh, no, you go ahead. Oh, Tuesday, you come. So I went. Yeah. And then I learned it was a Mutual Improvement Association. Mutual Improvement Association.
Right. That makes more sense.
But you see, one of the young people invited me to go. It wasn't the leaders or anything. They invited me.
Okay. That's right.
We're also, still as investigators, we were approached by a brother who was teaching genealogy class.
Oh, yeah.
Family history. Why don't you guys like to take a genealogy class, do family history and so on? So we started taking the class in the branch, still as investigators.
Wow, that's cool.
So when the missionaries finally explained to us about the priesthood band, we thought, well, people didn't treat us any different. everybody else in the church knows about this. And so, okay, so we will not be able to, my father and I will not be able to hold the priesthood. But like, look, we're so well fellowship, so well integrated in the church. We go to activities, we participate in the classes, and so on. And people, people are so nice to us, this is not going to be a problem. And then, of course, since we already had that testimony, as looking at the Book of Mormon is true, we believe Joseph Smith was a prophet. And we thought, okay, if the price, we found the truth. If the price of living that truth was to not hold the priesthood, we were willing to pay that price. And so we never had a thought that the church was racist. If there had been racist members of the church, they would not have been different than my few racist classmates or a couple of racist teachers in school. It's just, life in Brazil normally. So what's different? It's nothing different. And so it didn't bother us. It bothered a lot of people.
Right.
It bothered a lot of people, of white members, but it didn't bother us. In fact, I remember, my goodness, how many times my father was invited in those first few years to speak in firesides all over.
Oh, yeah.
Because everybody wanted to. And the question they had was, how did you do? And there were people, some man there, telling my father, I don't know if I would have baptized, if I had been in your place, I'm not sure that I would have been baptized, And my father said, well, my father just bore his testimony. That was it.
Wow.
1975, to see very few people with Black African ancestry joined the church because the missionaries had instructions not to teach.
Interesting.
Yeah,
not to teach. From 1975?
No, up to 1978.
Okay.
Up to 1978. In Brazil, they knew that a lot of Brazilians had Black African ancestry.
Yeah.
Not as many, not as many as they believed in Salt Lake City, but they didn't know any better, and so they said, "Oh, anybody who's has a little more of a tan complexion, check it out because it must have." And they didn't realize that we love to go to the beach there, and in Brazil, it's a badge of honor when you come with a really nice tan, and so people. And also, they failed to understand that a significant percentage of the Brazilian population has indigenous ancestry. Or Lamanite, as we call it, ancestry. And so for them, everything was African. Dark skin is African.
Interesting.
Which in some regions was not the case at all. And so when we had in 1975 an area conference where all members of the church, active members of the church, congregated in São Paulo, Brazil, I remember members from southern Brazil and elsewhere wanted to take pictures of my family. Taking pictures,
Really?
We were like, rock stars, I remember one brother who told us he was from southern Brazil and said, I want to take this. Because no, I have proof. I'm going to show my friends. I have proof that the church is not racist. I said, oh, okay, well, fine. So at this point, I was, not early 1975. So I was, 15 years old, going 16. And so, it bothered a lot of people, but it did not bother us.
Yeah. And how big was your first branch? And what was the ethnic makeup?
Well, it was just the usual. You see, Rio de Janeiro, like São Paulo, is very ethnically mixed. You have everything there, from pure Portuguese to part indigenous, part Jewish, part this, part that. You go to São Paulo, it's even more. And there is part Italian, part Greek, and then you go part Japanese. You go further south in Brazil, then it's part German, part Ukrainian. It's very racially and ethnically mixed. and which means they're very cosmopolitan places also, which makes for even more openness
Yeah.
to others. You didn't have a whole lot. Yeah, there were always a few people who were kind of some little prejudice, they had held some prejudices there, but most people didn't. Most people just relished in that way. Well, we had all this difference and so on.
Nice.
So the branch reflected pretty much this reality, and so the ethnic makeup of that branch, 1972, was just the usual makeup of any other church in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah.
Nothing different.
Okay, cool. Cool. And I think you met your wife pretty young. Is that correct?
Yeah, because at that point then, we had one stake, and there was only one stake, and she was from a different city, but it was part of our stake. And so, there were activities, stake activities. We used to have those monthly seminary activities and competitions in our stake center, and she would come with her sister and other mostly young women from her branch. It was a city in the mountains called Petropolis. It's 1 hour away from Rio in the mountains. And so you just have to grab a bus there, and then from the bus station, one bus will take you to the stake center. So in 2 hours, she would go from her home to the stake center. And so, yeah, we met in activities. And then at one point, my father bought an apartment, through the National Oil Company. There was a co-op there. And they bought an apartment in her hometown that we used for, extended weekends and short vacations. And so the apartment was about 1.5 miles from her home. So every time we would go there, I'd go to visit her, and so we became friends.
Yeah.
And so we had been friends for a few years before we started dating, which we did in 1976, so 49 years ago. So that was it.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice.
Yeah, when you guys both served missions, right?
Yeah. Oh, when we started dating, she told me, "Yeah, I'll be your girlfriend, but there was one catch." She said, "I'm prepared to go on a mission." She's older than me, and if you try to prevent me from serving a mission, the deal is closed. I'm not. I said, no, go ahead. I was 16 years old, 17 years old. So I don't have a job and still in high school. Why would I say no? Don't go on a mission. Why would I say that?
Right.
Okay, so she served her mission in the Brazil São Paulo South mission, and she came back in early 1978, and then we became engaged, and we're getting ready to be married in August of 1978. We prepared everything, sent the invitations, rented an apartment, and then the revelation came. The 1978 revelation came. We continued our preparations to get married, but I had a stake president who didn't take no for an answer. So he kept insisting that I serve a mission. He says, "No, you have to, you have to, you have to." And there were others also. And so finally, I wish I could say that, no, I felt the Spirit telling me. No, I didn't. I didn't. I'm not going to lie. I've been telling this to people over the years. I'm not going to lie. Oh, no, I felt that I had to. No.
Yeah.
I just yielded to caved into the prayer, caved to the pressure.
Yeah.
But the problem is that when I decided to serve a mission, it was 3 weeks before the wedding.
Oh, that's crazy.
And all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
Because first, people were mad at me in my state because I was not going on a mission. I was going ahead with my marriage. They could go to the bulletin board to see my wedding invitation there. We're getting married, not going on a mission. So, no, I'm getting married there. See, well, there, you should go on a mission. Don't you have a testimony and so on? So, I do. I'm getting married, And so then when I decided to go on a mission, It was the opposite. I said, how dare you use a mission as an excuse not to not get married? You should be ashamed of yourself. Oh, you should be excommunicated. And so I called the state president and said, look, I need you to help me here. Okay, I was bad because I wasn't going. I'm bad because I'm going. Help me out here. Can't stand this.
Yeah.
And so he called the missionary department in Salt Lake City. And they said, okay, we can expedite these papers. So just send these papers as fast as you can. And we'll put it on top here when they get here. And they said, we actually have a group entering the newly opened MTC, still an improvised MTC in downtown São Paulo. So we have a group entering August 8th, having report to the MTC. Hopefully by the time he enters the MTC, we will know where he's going.
Yeah.
So I went to the MTC on August 8th, 1978, without a mission call.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, because they were expediting my papers. So they said, just go to the MTC. We'll figure out by the time you finish. And the MTC was just a day and a half, pretty much. So
okay.
So
that's all you need.
That's all. Yeah. Well, that's not what I needed because I never had any preparation to be a missionary. Because I didn't have the priesthood. I was never even invited to missionary preparation firesides or other activities related to missionary preparation. And there were quite a few. I was never even invited to go to those. I had no preparation whatsoever. Yeah. I was the greenest green missionary,
Right.
But I had one thing that in my favor. I had a testimony, and I had read all the standard works. When I was 16 years old,
oh, wow.
I read all the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Talking Gospel, Great Price, read everything. Also, I had been a very good student in seminary. Mm-hmm. I loved to study in seminary. And I had already started the Institute, and I was pretty good in the Institute as well. And in 1976, I came to the U.S., and I was here in Utah as well. I was in L.A. and in Utah. And I bought, as soon as I got off the plane in Salt Lake City, my first stop was the Deseret Bookstore on Temple Square. And I bought the equivalent of 3 boxes of books. Mm-hmm. And from the Deseret Bookstore, we went to the post office, and I shipped 3 boxes to myself in Brazil.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I read those books.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I started my mission, I didn't have any preparation to serve as a missionary, but I had read the standard works. Yeah. I had read, comprehensive history of the church.
Oh, wow.
I had...
The B.H. Roberts?
Yeah, B.H. Roberts. Wow. I read all the 6 volumes.
Oh my goodness!
One day I told Truman Madison that I said, "You did what? You're crazy! Nobody reads that stuff." So I read them. I read, and I had also bought Mormon Doctrine, and consulted it many times. When people would say things there, I would be consulted. I also bought Doctrines of Salvation. And I read the 3 volumes.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
So when I got to the MTC, I wasn't green as far as proselytizing work.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it. I knew the basics,
sure,
but didn't even have any formal preparation for it. But in terms of doctrine,
you were right.
I could give a run for anybody.
Yeah.
Could agree, anyone else, I could give a run for the money. Mm-hmm. And that helped, because pretty soon, all the missionaries and local members, they knew that when they had questions, we can ask Elder Martins. Elder Martins would know this. And so I became fairly respected during my missionary service because of that. Well, I was widely known, of course, Because of that rush to get me to the MTC, I ended up being the first member with a Black African ancestry to start serving a mission in 1978.
Oh, wow. So you're the first Black missionary of the 20th
century.
And
the church in Niels published that. Okay. Because they had Jacques Jonasant and Mary Stuart Lawson Meyer, who received their calls to enter the MTC here in Provo in September of 78. Mm-hmm. And I had been serving since early August.
Wow.
Okay. So, and so when when copies of the church news started to percolate through the church and got in Brazil, people saw that and said, "Oh, yeah, he's in my ward. He's serving in my ward," and so on and so.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there were people wanting to take pictures with me and so on and so on. But I was always kind of a little anti, publicity type person and so on, and so okay, fine. If it helps the work of the church, okay, fine, go ahead, take a picture and so on. So there was, if you find people who have those speak, there was, kind of so shy,
Right.
Okay, you want to take? Okay, fine, go take my picture.
Yeah.
So, but you see, that also brought an interesting experience for me. Every place I would be transferred to, I would get there on Sunday, first Sunday. "Oh, Elder Martins, we're so glad to have you here in our ward. Now we can go back to all those people who never accepted the church in the past because of the priesthood ban, and I was showered with referrals.
Yeah.
Every place.
Yeah.
Not one of those was baptized.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because now, no, but your church has that tithing thing, right?
Okay.
No, but I still like to have my beer, on a hot day, and so.
Yeah.
So I came to realize that, so look, people were using the priesthood ban as an excuse. Because the reason why they did not accept was not because of the priesthood ban, but first of all, they were white to begin with. Okay, to begin with, the priesthood ban was not going to affect them.
Yeah.
And then what they really wanted was their beer, their football, soccer, football on Sunday. That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
Okay, and not to pay tithing and so on. That's what really the motivation really for their refusal to accept the missionaries.
Yeah.
And so 1 year into my mission, I had come to this realization, and I said, "Look, sure. When I get to new areas, oh yeah, please, give me the referrals." But I would go there without a whole lot of faith.
Yeah.
Because I knew there's a little. I only had 2 of the people, my companions and I baptized. I only had 2 who were people with a little bit more of a dark complexion. The others, no, it's okay. That's okay. That's fine. So that's some of the things that I have in my. So now we talked about my parents' conversion, my parents, and then my mission. So what else you have there on your GPT text there?
Well, I have my notes on here. I was just looking.
You have a note on
some other quick things. My paper was not ChatGPT, by the way.
I know, but I thought it was a good joke.
Yeah. Let's see.
Feel free to disagree.
There's a lot of different directions we could go. Let's see.
All right. So I'm leaving the.
Okay.
That's one direction, right?
That is one direction.
Okay, fine. Go ahead. Do the holes.
Let's see. So I have a few points here. I'm not sure chronologically which one comes where, but I do want to talk about.
Birth comes first.
Yeah. Well, we've already hit that one.
Okay. Yeah.
But because you were a mission president as well, right?
Yeah, it was a year that they didn't have too many candidates, so.
Yeah, they got real desperate. They picked you up.
No, we have this, all joking aside, it was something that my father didn't live to see, but my father, well, I should mention this. Some of the people who are watching already know this. Marcus Elvésio Martins. And yes, my father was the first member of the church with Black African ancestry to be called as a mission president and as a general authority 70, which he served in the second quarter of the 70 from 1990 to 1995. And my father had this expectation that someday I might be called. In fact, he was almost sure that I would. Now, he didn't live to see that happen, but he did. So in 2011 through 2014, my wife and I served as mission leaders in the Brazil São Paulo North Mission, where I had served as a young missionary. She had served in the São Paulo South Mission. I served in the São Paulo North, and now we were mission leaders in the São Paulo North Mission. And it was a great honor, as I said, something that even though my father had told me that he had that expectation, I did not.
Yeah.
I told him, I used to tell him, and I remember one time we were here, I was here in Provo, and he was here also. And I said, I'm too cool to be mission president. They will never want me there. But it did. It did. And it was a remarkable experience also. Not only because I had missionaries, some of my mission, I call them mission sons and daughters, whose parents had been missionaries in my father's mission, Brazil Fortaleza mission, or I had cases of parents, fathers of missionaries, of my missionaries, who had been called and set apart as stake presidents or bishops by my father. I even had one missionary whose parents got married in part by my father's intervention, because his father was a recent convert and fairly old already, 25, almost 26 years old. And as a recent convert, went to a fireside where my father was speaking, and he had his girlfriend with him, and so he went to my father after the fireside and said, look, I want to serve a mission. My kids keep telling me to get married and so on, but I want to serve a mission, so that's what I want the most. And so my father asked his age, and he said, look, what you need to do is marry this young lady here. That's what you need to do now. That's your mission. Well, their son was one of my missionaries.
Oh, wow.
So there were these really nifty experiences that, man, the world goes round, and so it's phenomenal for a variety of reasons, but including this one, that had these connections. So yes, 2011 through 2014, we served as mission leaders.
That's awesome. Was that in the middle of your teaching career?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at that point, I had been at BYU Hawaii for 11 years. I had been in the U.S. for 21 years. Living here, was already a U.S. citizen. In fact, I tell people, I say, look, it's kind of a, joking remark. They say, it seems that the Lord has a sense of humor. Because I always wanted to go back to Brazil. I never wanted to stay in the U.S. Okay, I never becoming a resident, becoming a citizen was never my plans. On the contrary, I used to tell people, look, when I get my PhD, I'm going to go from the Marriott Center directly to the airport, and go back home to Brazil, So, and so everything I did to return to Brazil, to find some kind of, job with a multinational company that would take me back, nothing worked. Nothing ever worked. I sent over 300 resumes, went to interviews, did everything. I, maxed out my credit cards to go to job fairs, in Florida, whatever, and nothing. And I remember, then thinking, okay, maybe I ought to look for a job in the U.S. And I recall then that I wanted to go to Brazil. So many things I can do there, so many things I can help there. But then when I finally decided, okay, that's it, Brazil is finished. I remember that in 1998, I was already a professor at Rick's College, now BYU Idaho.
Was that where you first taught?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I couldn't find a job in Brazil, so I accepted a position at Rick's College. but still looking for Brazil. And so at one point, through a friend, I got an interview at Intel.
Hmm.
And so had a telephone interview, then they flew me to California, interviews there and lunches and whatnot. And they said, look, we want you to go to Sao Paulo in Brazil to meet some of our people there. And so, and I was, oh, sure. And could you take your wife too? I said, sure. So they paid for me and my wife to fly to Sao Paulo, spent a few days there, interviewing, and even they put a relocation service company at our disposal to look for a place to live. We thought, okay, this is it. We're going.
Yeah.
Well, in the end, it didn't work. And that was the first time I remember the plane was taxiing at the international airport in Sao Paulo. And that was the first time that I thought, maybe I should really write off, the idea of coming back to Brazil and really settle in the United States. Get my green card, because I was on a work visa still. Get my green card. And that was the first time that I thought, 1998.
Yeah.
And so, okay, eventually, Rick's College, they told me they did not intend to sponsor my residency. There were some issues at the time with immigration law that everybody was concerned since 1996. And they said, well, it's going to be complicated and so on and so on. But then BYU Hawaii came and asked me, no, we need you here.
Yeah.
We want you here, and we want you to come here and be, they didn't tell me that right away, but later I learned that they didn't want me to go there just to teach. They wanted to be the leader of the religion program there. So, got the green card, and then when I became a U.S. citizen in 2010, I got a voicemail on my phone one afternoon there. Oh, this is the secretary to Jeffrey L. Holland. You'd like to set up a time to visit with you. He's going to Hawaii and wants to visit with you. My father had told me the process for selection, vetting, and calling of mission presidents. And when I found that voicemail, it was a Friday afternoon, so it was evening here in Utah. And I thought, okay, I know what this is. And that's when I thought, the Lord must have a sense of humor. Now that I'm a U.S. citizen,
Yeah, he's sending you back.
they're going to send me back. Okay, so, and so that's what happened when the call finally came in February. It was no surprise. We were told that we were going to be called to a Portuguese-speaking mission. And so I look at all the missions that were, changing presidents in 2011. I saw, and so Rio de Janeiro, that's not going to be, because I'm from Rio de Janeiro, I'm not going to be called to Rio. Fortaleza, my father was the first mission president there. He opened that mission. That'd be cool. Father, son, servant. I succeeded my father as bishop in our home ward.
Oh, yeah.
And so now, hey, I could be one of his successors in the Fortaleza mission. That'd be cool. And I was a São Paulo North mission. Now it's about, I served in São Paulo North. They're going to call me to the same mission I served.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what happened, which is another sense of humor kind of a thing. And I said, go back there and fix the mess you left behind.
Yeah.
That was a joke. I didn't find it funny, but sorry. Yeah, I can only do so much. Look, at this hour, I can only do so much.
Did you fix the mess that you left, you think?
Well, I don't know. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Okay. Yeah.
I hope I didn't make too many others.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And let's see. And so you served as mission president, you said 2011 to 14 or?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you got back off the mission, and then where you were back to BYU Hawaii?
Yeah, they had my position there on Bain Marie, on the back burner there. And so I resumed. And soon after that, that's when they called me to serve as a dean. And so I served as a dean for a few years. After a mission, you keep thinking, well, okay, for me to do now. And that's when I started to look, we have all these resources here, technology. Why not reach out to people who are out there, people who are never going to come to one of the church universities in the United States and take, the knowledge, the insights that we have and take to them. And so I started to, make arrangements to, I started to utilize video more. I had already, as soon as I arrived in Hawaii, I took a course with my oldest daughter on video editing and production. And they had a local community cable channel, and they offered free courses. And so we took those courses on editing and production. In fact, our last project we did together, my daughter and I, was a commercial for conservation or for environmental conservation. Spent a whole Saturday working on that, filming, editing, and everything. So
Yeah.
And so I thought, we do something. And I had been utilizing the internet. I had my own website since 1994. When I was here at BYU as a part-time lecturer at BYU Provo. I started posting things and telling students, look, you go here. Oh, you want more information? Just go to this website here. And so that's what I had. And so I said, no, we got to do more. And so I started to make preparations to start having video lectures. And so I started recording lectures on video, editing them, but it was still VHS, video cassette, and so I would send them to people. So, and I said, that's not efficient. But then that's when the internet began, coming into broadband, and everybody now then had access to broadband, and our stake centers back then had, and so now we are getting to 2016, and so I started telling my students, they were going, look, I'm available to do firesides online using Skype. There was no Zoom yet, but using Skype. And one of my former students from Mongolia contacted me and said, we have 2 stakes here, and both stake presidents said, they would be glad to have you speak to us. And so in December of 2016, I did my first, online fireside. It was a multi-stake fireside to Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. It was 6:30 p.m. for them and midnight for me in Laie, Hawaii. So, and I was with them until 2 a.m. my time. So, fortunately, my ward that year was meeting, the later schedule, not late schedule. So I had plenty of time to sleep still. But then from that point on, never stopped. And so I've been doing that, ever since.
Yeah.
And these are interactive firesides. So when the pandemic started and people started using Zoom, I looked at that and I said, well, welcome to my club.
Yeah.
Okay, I've been doing this for 4 years already. So more of the same. So I was ready to jump into that. And so there are a lot of, usually it will be interactive. Okay, meaning I would have a little message, and then I would open for questions. And what I asked them to do is that they would have a laptop on the pulpit, the chapel, facing through the camera, facing the congregation. So they were projecting my image, on the big screen. And on my screen, I could see them. And so I could see the people there. And so it was almost as if I were there. Because so the brother there, you raise your hand over there. Yeah, I saw you there. Go ahead. What's your question? And it became something very, 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 rewarding for me.
Yeah.
Because look, I'm there in the middle of the ocean in Laie, Hawaii, but I was in contact, and a lot of those were, broadcast to Brazil. although I had also to Japan, Hong Kong, Malaysia. Okay, I did quite a few, and also to Asia. But it became something very rewarding on my last few years at BYU. But then came an offer with an early retirement, and I said, well, let's think about this, and so I decided to take it. So
and here you are.
that's it. Here I am now. And then, of course, BYU came and said, oh, would you like to come here and just teach one semester for us? I was like, okay, well, yeah, it's been 30 years since I taught at BYU. Yeah, why not? You know, one last hurrah, you know, kind of a. And
Well,
so
I'm glad you
been a
accepted.
privilege. Yeah. Well, they wanted me to come for a whole semester. I said, no, 4 months in Newton. You know, I'm in Seattle now. I settled in a suburb of Seattle. It's all green. It's mild weather. It doesn't rain as much as people said it would. And it's beautiful. Even in the winter, it's beautiful. Even more beautiful in the fall. So 4 months in Utah, thanks with no thanks. It's like, how about spring or summer? Summer is too hot. Man, I'm a sexagenarian and retired. So, you know, I don't know, summer is too hot. Spring, okay, spring is fine. So here we are.
Sweet.
Last class, you know, in 2 days.
Are you
By the way, have you uploaded your paper?
I did. It was like 11:30 last night.
11:30. Oh, jeez, you know.
Last minute.
Last minute. Okay, fine.
The best papers are written at the last minute. Maybe. We'll see. You'll be the judge of that.
No comments.
Maybe one or two last questions before we end. I remember in class, you talked about how last time you were at BYU, you were in someone who a lot of my listeners probably know, Eugene England's ward.
Yes.
And you told a kind of a funny story about how everybody talked about him.
Yeah. When we lived in Utah 7 years, and the first 2 years we were attending a married student ward at BYU. But married student wards in those days did not have youth programs. They had huge primaries, even bigger nurseries, but no young men, young women. So for young men, young women, and I had my 2 older children who were getting to be teenagers then, and we wanted them, and I said, well, you know, you have to take them to activities in one of the community wards. And so how do you attend a ward on Sunday and go to activities in the other? They're not going to feel integrated. And so my stake president at the time, Terrence Olson, which reminds me, I have to find out where he is today. He said, no, I think you should start attending one of these community awards. And so they assigned us to attend Pleasant View First Ward, which was, it's a building behind the MTC here in Provo. And that changed everything for us. And so our first Sunday there, a year ago, I'm a high priest, I'm a former bishop. I had served, by that point, I had served 3 times as stake high counselor. So I go to my high priest group, and here's the 62 high priests, most of them old enough to be my father, some of them to be my grandfathers. And here I am, you know, still graduate student, although I was teaching already part-time here. But to my surprise, they embraced me. You know, they really came, oh, welcome, brother. And I said, wow, they respected me, they embraced me. But in one of those Sundays, see, Gene England was in England at the time. This was in the spring of 1992. I remember 1992. And so one of those high priests came to me one Sunday and said, look, I need to tell you something about one of our brothers here. He's a good man. He's a good man, but you have to be, he has some ideas, you know, that are kind of, you know, somewhat problematic.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, all right. Yeah, it's Brother Eugene England. So, okay, all right, I'll keep an eye on you. Okay. A month later, Gene England comes back and there he is in our high priest group. Oh, Brother Martinez, well, nice to meet you. Finally, I heard about you. Okay. Not thinking, okay, here's the problem talking to me. Have you ever read my essay, The Mormon Cross? No, I don't think I have. I'll get you a copy. Well, I'm pretty busy, with my doctoral program, my classes. Oh, no, just take your time. So he brings me a copy of his book of essays. So, man, what do I do? Do I read this? Do I not read this? Well, I'm going to go to church and one of these Sundays going to ask, have you read it? And so I'm going to read it. Okay. Say a prayer, read, that's it. So I'm reading the thing and I say, he thinks like me. He thinks like me. If he's a problem, so am I. Okay? And that was the beginning of this friendship, of this friendship. And I read the whole book of essays, all the essays in the book. And I said, I love this. I love this guy, how this guy thinks, So and that's how our friendship began, right there. The one brother said, you got to be careful with him. I said, I didn't go back to that brother to say, no, you should be careful with me too, but I didn't say that.
Yeah.
But it was great.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, trying to think if there's anything else. Actually, one question. This will be probably the last one.
Okay.
When did you
brace for impact? I'm going to fasten my seatbelt here.
When did you start learning English? Because I imagine you probably didn't. Did you grow up speaking English?
Well, English was part of the curriculum of the schools in Brazil. It was also a foreign language. Mm-hmm. And more often than not, it would be English from first grade on. Colors, my name is, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we sang those songs. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So from first grade, we started. But one characteristic in Brazilian families is, and I think it is still the case, even though I haven't lived in Brazil for 35 years, but I think it is still the case. They spend a lot of money in the education of their children. Yeah. They send children to the best schools they can afford, depending on the family's budget, and also to a lot of extracurricular, sports, music, and languages. And so I believe from 6th grade on, I had been attending English language schools, okay, as an extracurricular activity. And I attended for a number of years. And I attended 3 schools. The third one, I attended one year, the second one for another year. The third one I attended for 2.5 years. This third one was one that focused a lot on conversation, not only vocabulary building and grammar. Classes were 2 hours long, and half an hour was in the lab listening, okay, and repeating, and the teacher there, monitoring our pronunciation, working with our pronunciation. And we had drills in class, the hour and a half in class. Part of it was grammar, part of it was vocabulary, but part of it was also pronunciation, drilling. Let's repeat this. No, you pronounce it this way, and so on. All the teachers in that school had lived in the U.S. A number of them were Brazilians, but they had lived here. And that school was, perhaps the best that I attended at that time. I did not finish that school. I don't have a certificate because I started working at the end of that, what would have been the third year. I started working, so I quit the school. But I would speak to the point that when we had general authorities coming to Rio de Janeiro, I would be invited to be their interpreter. So I was an interpreter. In fact, in 1988, this was then, I was no longer a teenager, but later years, even was an interpreter to President Gordon B. Hinckley. He was a councilman in the first presidency at the time. He went there for a regional conference. And so And then 1984, I was invited to work in the retranslation of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, I forgot to touch on this.
Yes, I retranslated the Book of Mormon because they knew of my skills with the English language. And I did that for 2 years. 2 years, I retranslated the whole thing, and including letter A on the index, but then they told me to stop, because the index is going to be separate, so we're not going to retranslate it. But which for me was very rewarding, to go through every word, every punctuation mark in the book. I already had a testimony, of course, since 1972. The Book of Mormon was true, but then I gained an intellectual testimony. So there was absolutely no way Joseph Smith could have invented this thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely no way.
Yeah.
There are minutiae there that say, look, if Joseph had invented this, he would not have done this. He would not have written this. He would not have put this detail.
Yeah.
So
that's super
that was,
cool. Yeah. Well, I mean, you speak English better than most English speakers I know. For example, I've learned multiple English words from you. For example, I bet most listeners probably don't even know what you said earlier, sexagenarian. They probably don't even know what that means. And so it's like...
It has nothing to do with sex, okay?
Yeah. So I've appreciated you coming on. I've appreciated your class. Just learning from you, being able to get to know you. I guess before we close, do you have any sort of message for listeners or anything you want to say to the people?
Message? You didn't say anything about message. Well, so okay. Oh yeah, be good.
There you have it. Be good. We'll see you next time on the Rational Theology Podcast.